How can we prepare ourselves for death? Don't accumulate anything whatever. Power, money, prestige, virtue, knowledge, even the so-called spiritual experiences. Don't accumulate. If there is no accumulation, one is ready to die at any moment because there is nothing to lose. The fear of death is not really fear of death. It comes out of the accumulations of life. When there is too much to lose, one clings to it. That is the meaning of Jesus saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." It doesn't mean becoming a beggar, and it doesn't mean renouncing the world. Be in the world, but don't be of the world. Don't accumulate inside. Be poor in spirit. Never possess anything, and then one is ready to die. Possessiveness is the problem, not life itself. The more one possesses, the more one is afraid to lose. If there is no possession, if one's purity, if one's spirit is uncontaminated by anything, if one is simply there alone, they can disappear any moment. Whenever death knocks on the door, it will find them ready. Nothing is lost by going with death. It may be moving into a new experience. When it is said not to accumulate, it is meant as an absolute imperative. It's not about refraining from accumulating things of this world only to accumulate virtue, knowledge, and so-called spiritual experiences, visions. No. The instruction is in absolute terms. Don't accumulate. There are people, particularly in the East, who teach renunciation. They say, don't accumulate anything in this world because it will be taken away when death comes. These people seem to be basically greedier than ordinary worldly people. Their logic is, don't accumulate in this world because death will take it away. So accumulate something that death cannot take away from you. Accumulate virtue. Accumulate character, morality, knowledge. Accumulate experiences, spiritual experiences, experiences of meditation, this and that. Accumulate something that death cannot take away. But if there is accumulation, with that accumulation comes fear. Each accumulation brings fear in its own proportion. Then there is fear. Don't accumulate and fear disappears. This is not renunciation in the old sense. This is an absolutely new concept. It teaches to be in the world and yet not of it. Then one is always ready. There is a story about a great Sufi mystic, Abraham Adam. Once he was the emperor of Bukhara, then he left everything and became a Sufi beggar. When he was staying with another Sufi mystic, he was puzzled because every day the man was continuously complaining of his poverty. Abraham Adam said to him, "The way you abuse it, it may be that you have bought your poverty cheaply." "How stupid you must be," the man retorted, not knowing to whom he was talking, not knowing that Abraham was once the emperor. He said, "How stupid you must be to think that one buys poverty." Abraham replied, "In my case, I paid my kingdom for it. I would even give away 100 worlds for a single moment of it. For every day its value becomes more and more to me. No wonder then that I give thanks for it while you lament it." The purity of the spirit is the real poverty. The word Sufi comes from an Arabic word, Safa. Safa means purity. Sufi means one who is pure in the heart. And what is purity? Don't misunderstand. Purity has nothing to do with morality. Don't interpret it in a moralistic way. Purity has nothing to do with Puritans. Purity simply means an uncontaminated state of mind, where only consciousness is and nothing else. Nothing else really enters into consciousness. But if one hankers to possess, that hankering contaminates. Gold cannot enter into consciousness. There is no way. How can one take gold into being? There is no way. Money cannot enter into consciousness. But if there is a desire to possess, that possessiveness can enter into consciousness. Then one becomes impure. If there is no desire to possess anything, one becomes fearless. Then even death is a beautiful experience to pass through. A person who is truly spiritual has tremendous experiences, but they never accumulate them. Once they have happened, they are forgotten. They are never remembered or projected into the future. There is no desire for them to be repeated or to happen again. There is no prayer for them. Once they have happened, they have happened. Finished. One is finished with them and moves away from them, always available for the new, never carrying the old. And if the old is not carried, life will be found absolutely new. Incredibly, unbelievably new at each step. Life is new, only the mind is old. If one looks through the old mind, life also looks like a repetition, a boring thing. If one does not look through the mind, mind means the past, mind means accumulated experiences, knowledge. Mind means that which has been passed through but is still being held on to. Mind is a hangover, dust from the past covering the mirror-like consciousness. When one looks through it, everything becomes distorted. Mind is the faculty of distortion. If one does not look through the mind, there will be readiness for death. In fact, not looking through the mind reveals that life is eternal. Only the mind dies. Without the mind, there is deathlessness. Without the mind, nothing has ever died. Life goes on and on forever. It has no beginning and no end. Accumulate. Then there is a beginning, and then there will be an end. When it is said how to prepare for death, it does not mean preparing for the death that will come in the end. That is very far away. If preparation for it begins, it will be for the future, and again the mind will come in. No, preparing for death doesn't mean preparing for the final death. It means the death that visits every moment with each exhalation. Accept this death each moment, and there will be readiness for the final death when it comes. Start dying each moment to the past. Clean yourself of the past each moment. Die to the known so that availability to the unknown is possible. With dying and being reborn each moment, one will be able to live life and also live death. And that's what spirituality is really all about. To live death intensely, to live life intensely. To live both so passionately that nothing is left behind, not even death. If life and death are lived totally, transcendence is possible. In that tremendous passion and intensity of life and death, duality is transcended, the dichotomy is transcended, and one comes to the one. That one is truly the truth. It can be called godliness, life, truth, ecstasy, or whatever name is chosen. Now the second question, at times there seems to be an intention to confuse about love and meditation. Sometimes the ultimate futility of love is stressed. On other occasions, meditation is pronounced as being useless. And sometimes it is said that both love and meditation are fundamental paths of enlightenment. The questioner says, at times you seem to intend to confuse us. No, the listening was not attentive. Confusion is always present, not only at times. Confusion is the method. The intention in confusing is to uproot from the mind. There is no desire for any roots in the mind in the name of love, in the name of meditation, or in the name of God. The mind is very cunning. It can thrive on anything, on meditation, on love. The moment it is seen that the mind is thriving on something, it must immediately be uprooted from it. The whole effort is to create a no-mind state. The purpose is not to convince anyone about anything. There is no intention to give a dogma or a creed to live by. The intention is to take all creeds away, because only then will life happen. There is no giving of anything to live by. The aim is to simply take all props away, all crutches. The mind is very clever. If it is said, drop money, the mind says, okay. Can I cling to meditation? If it is said to the mind, renounce the world, the mind says, okay. Can I now possess spiritual experiences? If it is said, renounce the world, the mind says, I can renounce the world, but now I will cling to the idea of God. And nothing is a greater barrier to godliness than the idea of God. The word God has become a great barrier. The belief in God has become a great barrier. If there is a desire to reach godliness, all ideas about God, all beliefs about God, Hindu, Christian, Mohammedan, must be dropped. One must be absolutely silent, unclinging, not knowing. In that profound ignorance, godliness reveals itself, only in that profound ignorance. The effort here is totally different from the usual effort. What is being done here is diametrically opposite to what is commonly done. The effort here is to create profound ignorance, so confusion must be created. Whenever some knowledge is seen to be gathered, it must immediately be jumped on and destroyed. By and by, there will be learning. Being close to this, learning is bound to happen. That it is futile to accumulate because it will not be left in peace. If something is clung to, it will be taken away. So what is the point? One day, there will simply be listening, not clinging, not making any belief out of it, not creating a philosophy, a theology out of it, simply listening as to the birds, as to the wind passing through the pines, as to the river rushing toward the ocean, as to the wild roar of the ocean waves, then no philosophy is created. One simply listens. Let this presence be like a wild ocean roaring in front of you, or a wind passing through the trees, or birds singing in the morning. This is not a philosopher speaking, and no knowledge is being imparted. The intention is to point to something that is beyond knowledge. So the moment there is a nod, the moment there is agreement, yes, this is true, and the moment something is seen to be accumulated, it must be immediately contradicted to create confusion. Confusion is the method. It is being done all the time. There will be no rest until that whole effort of philosophizing is dropped, until listening begins without any mind, out of the sheer joy of it as one listens to music. When listening begins in that way, there will never be confusion. Confusion arises because something is first clung to, and then in the next step, it is destroyed. Confusion is felt. A house was being built, and again it was destroyed. The confusion is in fact self-created. Do not create that house, and then it cannot be destroyed. If a house is created, it will be destroyed. If there is a stop to creating houses, they are card houses after all. If the creation of houses stops, if it is recognized, this presence will come and destroy, and if there is simply waiting and listening without bothering to make any house to live in, then confusion cannot arise. And the day confusion is no longer possible will be a great day of rejoicing, because that very moment understanding will be possible, not by the intellect, but by the being. It will be a communion, not a communication. It will be a transfer of energy, not of words. Entry into this house will have happened. No house will be allowed to be created because that will be a barrier. Then living in that house will begin, and the intention is to bring you into this house. Jesus says to his disciples, "In my God's house there are many mansions. Likewise, I am taking you on a journey to where a great palace is waiting. But if houses are being made by the side of the road, they must be destroyed. Otherwise, the journey will be destroyed, and the goal will never be reached." There is a tendency to worship anything. There is such a hurry, such impatience, that whatever is said is simply grabbed. This will not be allowed to happen, so be alert. If there is alertness, there will be no need for confusion. In fact, if there is alertness, no matter what is done, confusion will not arise. The day it can be said, "Now nothing can confuse me. Whatever is said, I listen, I rejoice in it, but I don't make any conceptualization," that will be the day confusion becomes impossible. Until that moment, confusion will be created again and again and again. Sex is more closely related to birth than to death. Birth is out of sex. Birth is a sexual phenomenon. Naturally, sex is also closely related to death, but as a byproduct. Because birth is out of sex, death is also going to be out of sex. Hence, the nonsensical idea arose in the East that if celibacy is maintained, if brahmacharya is practiced, if one goes beyond sex, death will never happen. Immortality will be achieved. That is foolish because death is not something that will happen in the future. It has already happened with birth. It cannot be avoided. Indulgence in sex or indulgence in celibacy will make no difference. A man had completed his 100th year, and a few journalists came to interview him. He was the first citizen of his town to become a centenarian. They asked how he had attained such a great age. He said, "I never touched wine. I was never interested in women. That must be the reason for it." Immediately, something in the next room fell loudly, and there was a racket. The journalists became very alert. They asked, "What is going on?" The man said, "It must be my dad. It seems he is again running after the maid, and he seems to be drunk." The old man must be 125. The man had said, "I have attained this age because of celibacy, and because I never touched any wine, I have remained away from women." But here is his father still rushing, drunk, trying to catch hold of a woman. Death has already happened the moment incarnation in the body occurred. The moment the womb was entered, death had already happened. The clock of life can run only so far, 70 years, 80 years. It depends on 1,001 things. But the clock can only run so far. It makes no difference how life is lived. Death is going to happen. Death cannot be avoided. The first thing is, birth and death are both related to sex, but just by becoming celibate, death is not transcended. Death has already happened with birth. There is no way to transcend it. It is going to happen because it has already happened. It is only a question of time unfolding. The rush toward it continues each moment. So don't try to be celibate just to avoid death, because that too is based on fear. The people who try to become celibate are afraid of death, and one who is afraid of death can never know what death is, can never know what deathlessness is. So don't be afraid. And celibacy can only be spontaneous. The question was asked, what is the meaning of spontaneous celibacy? Celibacy can only be spontaneous. There is no other type of celibacy. If it is not spontaneous, it is not celibacy. It can be forced, sexuality can be controlled, but that is not going to help. That will not result in celibacy, only in becoming more and more sexual. Sex will spread all over the being. It will become part of the unconscious. It will move dreams. It will become the motivation in dreams. It will become fantasy. In fact, sexuality will increase more than ever before. Thoughts about it will multiply, and it will have to be repressed again and again. And whatever is repressed must be repressed repeatedly, because the victory is never complete. There is no way to destroy sex by force, by violence. There is no way to control and discipline it. The people who have tried to control and discipline it have made the whole world very pornographic. The so-called saints have a very pornographic mind. If a window could be created and a hole made in their heads, only sex pornography would be seen. It is bound to be so. It is natural. Never enforce any celibacy on oneself. Try to understand what sexuality is. Go deep into it. It has a tremendous beauty of its own. It is one of the profoundest mysteries of life. Life comes out of it. It has to be a great mystery. Sex is not sin. Repression is a sin. Sex is very natural, very spontaneous. It is not something that was done to have it. It is inborn. It is part of being. Don't condemn it, don't judge it, don't fear it, don't fight with it. Simply go into it more meditatively. Let it happen in such silence and such deep acceptance that the very core of it can be known. The moment the very core of sexual orgasm is penetrated, by and by, it will be seen that sex is losing its appeal, energy is moving on a higher plane, there is becoming more loving and less sexual. And this happens spontaneously. The message is not to become more loving. The message is that if the mystery of sex is deeply explored, love arises out of it naturally. Becoming more loving and less sexual happens, and one day there is just a pure flame of love. All the smoke of sex has disappeared. The crude energy of sex has been transformed into a more subtle perfume, the perfume of love. Then the guidance will be to go deep into love. If love is deeply explored, again, the very core of it will be reached. And in that moment, prayerfulness will arise. That too happens spontaneously. In sex, there is more concern with the body. In love, there is more concern with the psyche. In prayerfulness, there is a sudden concern with the soul. These are the three possibilities hidden in the seed of sex. And when sex has disappeared into love, and love has disappeared into prayerfulness, there is a spontaneous celibacy. The Indian term for it is very beautiful. It is brahmacharya. The word literally means living like a god. Brahmacharya means living like a god. The whole energy is just prayerfulness. The whole energy is just a grace, a gratitude, a benediction. One becomes absolutely divine. But the message is not that sex is not divine. It is the seed. Love is the tree. Prayer is the flowering. Prayer arises out of sex energy. It must be respected and gratitude shown toward it. Sex should be respected because everything is going to happen out of it. Life has happened out of it. Death is going to happen out of it. Love, prayer, and godliness are going to happen out of it. Sex carries the whole blueprint of destiny. Sex is not just sex. Sex is all. So if from the very beginning an anti-attitude is taken, the whole journey of life will be missed. And such a fight will be involved in that it leads nowhere. A fight in which defeat is certain will be engaged. Sexual energy cannot be defeated because in sexual energy, godliness is hidden. In sexual energy, love and prayer are hidden. How can it be defeated? One is very tiny, and sexual energy is very universal. This whole existence is full of sexual energy. But the word sex has become so condemned. It has to be taken out of the mud. It has to be cleaned. A temple has to be made around it. And remember, celibacy can only be spontaneous. There is no other type of celibacy. It is not a control. It is not a discipline. It is a tremendous understanding of one's own energies and their possibilities. Why is this life, which has no end and no beginning, so mysterious? A guru was saying to one of the disciples that life is like a woman. It was surprising, so attentive listening followed to what he was saying. He was saying, the man who says he understands women is bragging. The man who thinks he understands them is gullible. The man who pretends to understand them is ambiguous. The man who wants to understand them is wistful. On the other hand, the man who does not say he understands them, does not think he understands them, does not pretend to understand them, does not even want to understand them, he understands them. And that's how life is also. Life is a woman. Try to understand life, and it will become a mess. Forget all about understanding. Just live it, and understanding will follow. The understanding is not going to be intellectual, theoretical. The understanding is going to be total. The understanding is not going to be verbal. It is going to be nonverbal. That is the meaning when it is said that life is a mystery. It can be lived, but it cannot be solved. It is possible to know what it is, but it cannot be articulated. That is the meaning of mystery. When it is said that life is a mystery, it means that life is not a problem. A problem can be solved. A mystery is that which cannot be solved. Insolubility is inbuilt. And it is good that life cannot be solved. Otherwise, what would be done then? Just think of it. If life is not a mystery and somebody comes and explains it, then what would be done? There would be nothing left except to commit suicide. Even that would look meaningless. Life is a mystery. The more it is known, the more beautiful it is. But the less it is known, a moment comes when suddenly life is being lived, flowing with it. An orgasmic relationship evolves between life and oneself, but it cannot be figured out what it is. That's the beauty of it. That's its infinite depth. And yes, there is no beginning and no end. How can there be any beginning to life and any end to life? Beginning will mean that something came out of nothing, and end will mean that something was there and went into nothing. That would be an even bigger mystery. When it is said that life has no beginning, it simply means it has always been there. How can there be a beginning? Can a line be marked and said that at this moment life started? As Christian theologians used to say, just 4,000 years before Jesus Christ, they say, life started on a certain Monday. Of course, it must have been in the morning, but how can it be called Monday if there was no Sunday before it? And how can it be called morning if there was no night before it? Just think of it. No, it is not possible to mark a line. That is foolish. It is not possible to mark a line because even to mark a line, something is needed. Something is needed to precede it. Otherwise, demarcation is not possible. A line can be marked if there are two things, but if there is only one thing, how can a line be marked? The fence around the house is possible because there is a neighbor. If there is no neighbor, nothing beyond the fence cannot exist. Just think of it. If there is absolutely nothing beyond the fence will fall down into nothing. How can it exist? Something is needed beyond the fence to hold it. If on a certain Monday life started, a Sunday is needed to precede it. Otherwise, the Monday will fall, topple down and disappear. And in the same way, there is no possibility of any end. Life simply is. It has been, it will be. It is eternity. And don't start thinking about it. Otherwise, it will be missed because all the time that is wasted in thinking about it is simply waste. Use that time, use that space, use that energy to live it. Why is it preferable to call meditation the art of dying rather than calling it the art of growing? Because the ego would like it very much if it were called the art of growing. The art of dying comes as a shock. Let an anecdote illustrate this. One day, a guru saw a crowd gathered around a pond. A priest with a huge turban on his head had fallen into the water and was calling for help. People were leaning over and saying, "Give your hand, Reverend, give your hand." But the priest didn't pay attention to their offer to rescue him. He kept wrestling with the water and shouting for help. Finally, the guru stepped forward. "Let this be handled." He stretched out his hand toward the priest and shouted at him, "Take this hand." The priest grabbed the guru's hand and was hoisted out of the pond. People were very surprised and asked the guru for the secret of this strategy. "It is very simple," he said. "This miser would not give anything to anyone, not even his hand. So instead of saying, 'Give your hand,' it was said, 'Take this hand, Your Reverence.' And sure enough, he took it. The ego would like it to be called the art of growing. Then the ego would feel perfectly good. So it is a question of growth, so it will remain and grow. That's what the ego always wants. It was knowingly called the art of dying. Meditation is the art of dying. Then the ego will be shocked. And it is also truer to call it the art of dying because the ego is not going to grow. The ego is going to die in meditation. These are the only two possibilities. Either the ego goes on growing more, becoming stronger, or it disappears. If the ego goes on growing and becomes stronger and stronger, it is getting more and more into the mud. It is getting more and more into fetters, into the imprisonment of it. Suffocation will follow. Life will become a hell. The growth of the ego is a cancerous growth. It is like cancer. It kills. Meditation is not the growth of the ego. It is the death of the ego. When to die is mentioned, it really means to live intensely, to live passionately. How can death occur unless life has been lived totally? In total life, there is death, and that death is beautiful. In a passionate, intense life, death comes spontaneously, as a silence, as a profound bliss. When to die is mentioned, it is not saying anything against life. In fact, if there is a fear of death, there will be fear of life as well. A person who is afraid of death will be afraid of life because life brings death. If the door is closed to the enemy, the friend will also be prohibited. Fear of the enemy leads to closing the door, and in doing so, the door is also closed to the friend. Fear can become so overwhelming that even the friend cannot be let in, because who knows, the friend may turn out to be the enemy. Or when the door is open, the enemy may enter. People have become afraid of life because they are afraid of death. They don't live because at the highest points, at the peaks, death always penetrates life. Has this been observed? Almost the majority of women have lived frigid lives. They are afraid of orgasm, afraid of that wild explosion of energy. For centuries, women have been frigid. They have not known what orgasm is. And almost the majority of men suffer from that fear as well. 95% of men suffer from premature ejaculation. They are so afraid of orgasm. There is so much fear that somehow they want to finish it. Somehow they want to get out of it. Again and again, they go into lovemaking with fear. The woman remains frigid, and the man becomes so afraid that he cannot stay in that state any longer. The very fear causes premature ejaculation, and the woman remains rigid, closed, holding herself. Now orgasm has disappeared from the world because of fear. In the deepest orgasm, death penetrates. It feels as if one is dying. If a woman goes into orgasm, she starts moaning, crying, screaming. She may even start saying, "I am dying, don't kill me." That actually happens. In deep orgasm, a moment comes where the ego cannot exist. Death penetrates. But that is the beauty of orgasm. People have become afraid of love because in love, too, death penetrates. If two lovers sit side by side in deep love and intimacy without even talking, talking is an escape from love. When two lovers talk, it simply shows they are avoiding intimacy. Words in between create distance. Without words, distance disappears and death appears. In silence, death is just lurking around, a beautiful phenomenon. But people are so afraid that they go on talking whether it is needed or not. They go on talking about anything, everything, but they cannot keep silent. If two lovers sit silently, death suddenly surrounds them. And when two lovers are silent, there is a certain happiness and also a certain sadness. Happiness because life is at its peak, and sadness because at its peak, death also comes in. Whenever silence is embraced, a sort of sadness is felt. Even looking at a rose flower, if one is sitting silently, not saying anything about the flower, just looking at it, in that silence, death is suddenly felt. The flower withers. Within moments, it will be gone, lost forever. Such beauty and so fragile. Such beauty and so vulnerable. Such a miracle. And soon it will be lost forever, never to return. Suddenly, sadness emerges. Whenever meditation occurs, death is felt moving around. In love, in orgasm, in any aesthetic experience, in music, in song, in poetry, in dance. Wherever the ego is suddenly lost, death is present. So let it be known, fear of life exists because there is fear of death. Learning how to die is the key to losing all fear of death. The moment the fear of death is lost, life can be lived. There is no argument against life. How could one speak against life? There is a mad love for life, such a mad love for life that, because of it, love for death has also emerged. It is part of life. When life is loved totally, how can death be avoided? Love for death must follow. When a flower is deeply loved, its withering away is loved too. When a woman is deeply loved, her aging is loved as well, and one day her death is loved too. That is part of the woman. Old age does not come from the outside, it comes from within. The beautiful face has become wrinkled now. Those wrinkles are loved too. They are part of the beloved. When a man's hair grows white, that too is loved. It has not happened from the outside. It is not an accident. Life is unfolding. Now the black hair has disappeared and the gray hair has come. There is no rejection, only love for them. They are part of the beloved. Then the man becomes old, becomes weak, and that too is loved. Then one day the man is gone, and that too is loved. Love loves all. Love knows nothing else but love. Hence, love for death must be embraced. If love for death is possible, then loving life will be very simple. If even death can be loved, there will be no problem. The problem arises because the people must have been repressing, must be afraid of life. Repression can bring dangerous outcomes. If repression continues, one day all aesthetic sense will be lost. The sense of beauty, grace, and divinity will be lost. Repression becomes such a feverish state that anything, even something ugly, can be done. If repression continues, the possibility exists that the ugliest life may be chosen. If repression goes on, the fever becomes so intense that consciousness is lost and neurosis takes over. Before repression becomes too much, it is time to relax and move into life. This is life. There is no need to feel guilty. Life is meant to be lived, loved, known, and experienced. Whatever instincts existence has given are just indications of where to move, where to seek, and where to find fulfillment. It is known that this life is not all. A greater life is hidden behind it, but it is hidden behind it. That greater life cannot be found against this life. It can only be found by indulging deeply in this life. There are waves on the ocean, and the ocean is hidden just behind them. If, seeing the turmoil and chaos, there is an escape from the waves, the ocean and its depth will also be escaped from. Jump in. Those waves are part of it. Dive deep, and the waves will disappear, revealing the depth, the absolute silence of the ocean. So here's the suggestion. There has been enough waiting, now no more. Enough is enough. Another anecdote. The Pope's personal waiter was delivering His Holiness breakfast when he slipped and threw the food all over the floor. "God damn it!" he screamed as he fell. His Holiness came out of the door of his room and said, "No cursing in here, my son. Say instead, Ave Maria." The following morning, as he attempted to deliver His Holiness breakfast, the waiter slipped again, throwing the food on the floor. "God damn it," screamed the poor man. "No, my son," said the Pope. "Ave Maria." On the third day, the waiter was trembling with fear, but this time he remembered. "Ave Maria," he yelled out as soon as he started falling with the breakfast on the floor. "No," exclaimed the Pope. "God damn it. This is my third day of skipping breakfast. Enough is enough." This is life. There is no need to keep skipping breakfast every day. Twice Ave Maria is good, but when it finally comes, it is goddamn it. Everybody is a piece of rock. Unless one attains to their uttermost glory, they are bound to be a piece of rock. But nothing is wrong in being a piece of rock, because the piece of rock is nothing but existence fast asleep, snoring. A piece of rock is godliness asleep. Nothing is wrong in the piece of rock. It has to be awakened. That's how the rock avoids its own growth. The rock avoids its own future, by dreaming. Dreaming is the barrier. By dreaming, reality is avoided. The real is avoided. It is an escape. There is no other escape. This is the only escape route, dreaming. When listening, one can dream also. Sitting here, one can have 1,001 thoughts roaming around in their mind. One can think of the future or of the past. One can be for and against what is being said. One can argue, one can debate inside oneself, but then one misses the essence. The essence is a fact here. There is no need to dream here. One can just be present, and tremendous will be the result of it. But people go on dreaming. People are dreamers, and that is their way. When making love, dreaming occurs. When eating, dreaming occurs. When walking on the road, having gone for a walk in the morning, the sun rising, the day beautiful, people getting up, life coming back again, dreaming continues. Nothing is seen clearly. Dreaming functions as a blindfold, and reality is missed. The rock can fly, the rock can grow wings. It is known from experience. Having been a rock once, then starting to grow wings, the possibility is understood, even if others may not know it. The rock can become a flower, the rock can become a river, the rock can become the ocean, the rock can become the sky. Infinite are the possibilities. The possibilities are as many as the possibilities of existence. Humanity is multidimensional. Someday a great thirst will possess one, a new passion will arise for the impossible, and one will be able to fly into the sky. It is yours, claim it. One may only look like a rock. Rocks also only look like rocks. If they make a little effort, if they shake themselves a little, they will find wings hidden there. They will find infinite possibilities opening, doors upon doors. But dreaming functions as the barrier. Being a rock is not the problem. Being too much in dreams is the problem. Start dropping dreams. They are futile, meaningless, a wastage, and nothing more. But people go on dreaming. Go on dreaming. By and by, people start thinking that dreaming is their only life. Life is not a dream, and dreaming is not life. Dreaming is avoiding life. Let me share an anecdote. On his 75th birthday, Turtletop rushed into a physician's office. "Doctor," he exclaimed, "I have got a date tonight with a 22-year-old girl. You got to give me something to pep me up." The MD smiled sympathetically and supplied the old man with a prescription. Later that night, out of curiosity, the medical man phoned his elderly patient. "Did the medicine help?" "It's wonderful," replied Turtletop. 7 times already." "That's great," agreed the doctor. "And what about the girl?" "The girl," said Turtletop, "she didn't get here yet." Don't go on dreaming, otherwise life will be missed. Stop dreaming and look at what is. It is already in front of you. It is already around you, within and without. Godliness is the only presence if one is not dreaming. If one is dreaming, then those dreams occupy the inner space. They become hindrances for godliness to enter. This dreaming is called Maya. Maya means a magic show, a dream show. When one is not dreaming, when in a state of no dream, reality is revealed. The reality is already there. It is not something to be achieved. Only one thing needs to be done. Dreams must be put aside, and no longer will one be a rock. One can fly to the very end of the sky. This is the invitation. This is the challenge.